The HOA fined me 50 grand for building a dam. Yeah, $50,000 for something that wasn't even hurting anyone. In fact, it was the only thing keeping half the neighborhood from turning into a swamp. They didn't just send letters, either. They sent a deputy to my front door, a young guy with no clue what was going on, and right behind him stood the HOA president, a woman named Linda Shaw, with that smug little smile people get when they think they've won. She had a folder full of papers she claimed were official county documents, waving them around like they meant something. Even from where I stood, I could tell they were fake. The seals were smudged, the text off-center. It looked like something printed in a hurry on a cheap home printer. She thought she had me cornered, that I'd fold like everyone else. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. See, I'm a retired electrician. Spent 40 years building things, fixing what's broken, and keeping my head down. I've lived on that property for 30 years, raised 2 kids there, buried my dog under the big oak by the creek. That little creek had always been a problem. Every spring, the water would swell and turn the backyards into muddy soup. It was worse for my neighbors, especially Carl and his wife, who lost their brand new mower last year when the floodwater got into their shed. We begged the HOA for help, sent photos, reports, but all they ever said was, the cost of mitigation exceeds the community budget. Translation, not their problem. So I did what any practical man would do. I studied the land, read some county flood control documents, and spent 2 months building a small concrete weir at the narrowest point of the creek. It wasn't some big dam, just enough to slow the water and redirect the overflow into a natural runoff ditch that led into the woods. When the next storm came, it worked perfectly. No flooding, no mud, no damage. My neighbors were thrilled. They brought over a bottle of bourbon, and we toasted to dry yards. For a while, it felt good, like we'd fixed something that no one else cared enough to fix. Then came the white envelope. Inside, fine assessment $50,000. The letter accused me of unauthorized alteration of community water flow. I thought it was a joke, but then I saw Linda's signature at the bottom with her usual flourish, like she was signing the Declaration of Independence. I called her number, which was technically the HOA hotline, but really just her home phone. She answered on the second ring. "There's no mistake, Mr. Lawson," she said in that syrupy voice. "You built an illegal structure and the fine stands." I told her that structure was the only reason her own lawn wasn't underwater. She said, "We don't govern by what makes your friends happy. We govern by the rules." Then she hung up. That's when I knew this wasn't about a rule, it was about power. I spent a week digging through old files, scanning every HOA letter I'd ever received. That's when I noticed the forged seal. The county permit Linda attached didn't even match the official template on the county website. So I started gathering evidence, photos of the dam, timestamps, rainfall data, even videos from my security camera showing how well it worked. Then I called in a friend, Maria Torres, a retired civil engineer I used to work with. Maria came over, looked through every document, then walked down to the creek. She crouched by the water, measured the slope, and checked the concrete thickness. When she stood up, she said, "Jim, this thing's textbook. She's not just wrong, she's lying." She wrote me a detailed report with her engineering stamp and diagrams proving the dam was safe and necessary. Together, we mailed the report to the entire HOA board. We even attached side-by-side photos comparing the real and fake county seals. A week later, Linda hit me with another fine, $10,000, this time for unauthorized surveillance equipment. She was talking about the wildlife camera I had set up to monitor the water levels. Then a few days later, I noticed 2 brand new cameras on the streetlight across from my house, both pointed directly at me. It was intimidation, plain and simple. Maria told me not to react, just to keep documenting. So I did. I captured footage of her and a maintenance guy adjusting those cameras, and even got her car in the frame. But Linda wasn't done. She sent her right-hand man, Tom Reynolds, over to inspect the dam. He stomped around for half a minute, wrote something on a clipboard, and left. That same night, I got an email saying I was being fined another $5 grand for structural instability. Only problem, I had the entire inspection recorded on my phone. 30 seconds of him poking at a rock and leaving. That video became my favorite piece of evidence. Still, the harassment didn't stop with me. Linda started going after anyone who supported me. Carl got fined for overgrown grass, and Mrs. Denton down the road got cited for a non-standard mailbox. It was pathetic. So I printed out 20 copies of what I called the HOA harassment log, a guide for neighbors to document every violation notice photo and conversation. It felt like a small act of rebellion, but it gave people a sense of control again. Then one morning, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up again. Same deputy, different papers. "Mr. Lawson," he said, "you've been ordered by the court to remove the unpermitted structure within 72 hours or face contempt charges." Linda stood behind him smirking. That was the moment it hit me they'd weaponized the system. My options were to fight and go broke, or give in. So I gave in. I hired a small excavator and tore the dam down myself. Watching it crumble felt like tearing down my own peace of mind. I took pictures as proof of compliance, sent them to the HOA, and poured myself a stiff drink. Then the rain came. It started that evening slow at first, then relentless. By morning, the creek had turned into a roaring brown river. My backyard was underwater. Carl's shed was gone, and Mrs. Denton's patio furniture was floating halfway down the block. Everything the dam had protected was now drowning. I stood there on my porch, soaked to the bone, watching the neighborhood suffer exactly what I'd tried to prevent. And I'll be honest, part of me felt vindicated. But instead of yelling, I got my camera. I filmed everything: the flooding, the damage, the neighbors bailing out their basements. The next day, I called a local reporter named Sarah Jenkins. I told her the HOA fined me $50,000 for building a dam that saved this neighborhood. They forced me to destroy it. Now look what's happened. She came out with a cameraman, spent an hour going through the files, the videos, Maria's report, even the fake permits. When the story aired that week, it exploded. The footage of the flooded yards and those phony documents went viral in our little town. Linda tried to deny everything, but she came off looking like a cartoon villain, blaming everyone but herself. Within days, the HOA called an emergency meeting. The place was packed. People who hadn't spoken to me in months showed up holding their own violation letters. Linda tried to keep order, but the crowd wasn't having it. Carl stood up first, demanding refunds for the fines. Others followed, shouting about fake rules and abusive power. I stood up last and showed the photo from my camera, Linda's car parked at dawn, the day she staged her fake inspection. The room went dead silent. She didn't say a word, just gathered her papers and walked out. By the end of that meeting, she'd resigned. The board voted to drop all my fines, issue a public apology, and pay for the flood damage. And for once, they did something right. They formed a new committee with open records and limits on fines. A month later, with Maria's help, we rebuilt the dam, this time with official county permits and half the neighborhood lending a hand. When the next storm rolled in, we all stood by the window together, watching the water rise slow and drain safely away. Maria raised her beer and said, "You can't outvote gravity." I smiled and said, "And you can't fake the truth forever. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have fought back or walked away? Drop a comment and tell me, because I still wonder if justice won that day or if nature just decided to make the final argument for me."